Check, check, check. Hey, how's it going? Today we're doing something a little special. Um, I don't usually like to produce live on stream because I get distracted, I get nervous, and usually when I am producing, I'm doing like five other things, like watching a movie, chatting on Discord. Like I have my little routine of how I produce, and it's hard for me to do it live on stream. So what I've been doing, and what I'll keep trying to be doing, is recording offline sessions and then restreaming them. And it's really great because I can like pause the recording if I need to. Like if I'm working on music and then I can just hit pause, go do something else, come back, unpause it, and not have to worry about, dead air or anything. And I can also, like watch Netflix and movies on the side and nobody will know. Um, Two Hem Dubs, thank you for the 6 months. So anyway, I'm going to be playing back my production session from yesterday. Before we do that, I will play you guys the song um, that is in question, and then we will play the video. I'll be here for any Q&A, and yeah, let's do it. So here's the song in question that we'll be working on today. Paliak, thank you for 15 months. I appreciate that. All right, let's do it. Only thing I will say before we start is that this second section I didn't record, but we can go over it afterwards. It's pretty straightforward after the rest of the beat is made. So I'm actually gonna shut off my camera so I can chill. I am here though with the video. So if you have any questions or anything, all right, let's get started. Production, take one. Little preview of the upcoming Buka's Finest sample pack he's working on. Mainly a drum sample pack, so look out for that soon. So we're going to be starting off mainly with drums just to get a groove going. And then we'll move on to the mid basses. Here I'm just making sure that the kick MIDI notes don't overlap each other. And that little dun dun dun, that's like in a lot of dungeon tracks. A lot of like old Leon Switch and Cryptic Minds. So when I'm making dungeon, I have a hard time not putting that in. A little bit of dun dun dun. I would say about half the time that I'm producing and I put in a snare, it's mostly a temporary snare, and I'll probably go back and change it at some point. I don't remember if I kept this snare or not. Um, but yeah, don't get too attached to kicks and snares. You know, use them to get going, but don't be afraid to change them. Lately, I've also been layering hi hats on top of my snares and my rim shots. I find it adds a nice little snap on top, a little bit of white noise, a little bit of extra clarity, and also just a little bit of like, I don't know, texture, whatever you want to call it. So I'm just testing out different hats here. So clip and clean, this is my little utility I built. It's essentially a clipper with a linear EQ after. As you can see here, I'll actually go back and pause it for a second. It's just something that I always, do at some point in a project is I'll have to clip some drums, and then because I don't want any artifacting in the low end, if you EQ after clipping, you can actually change the velocity and the volume of the sound, which defeats the purpose of the clipping, right? So I have a linear EQ after, and then I have a sampler after that. And the reason that I don't just keep this on in my project is, if you can see, the linear EQ creates a crazy amount of latency, and I don't like working with latency. So what I do is I play it through rolling sampler, which just records whatever's going through it. I load that exact sample back into my sampler. I remove the other samples, and now I just have the processed sample, and I get rid of the processing. It's a little bit convoluted, but it does for me what I need it to do, which is have a perfectly clipped and EQ'd snare without having to worry about latency. Ducker is a unit I made. It's pretty self-explanatory. And reason sometimes it's kind of annoying to create a send. So I just created this to be a reverb ducking send. I can always swap out the reverb, but essentially it'll just take the input signal and duck the reverb out of the way of the input signal. Yeah, I think I swapped it for this snare. I didn't like the original snare. So after all that work with the snare, I just ended up swapping it. Toraverb is hacks for ducking reverb, says a chat member. I'll have to check that out. Here, I'll tab it up for myself. Does it has a built-in ducker, I assume? So once again, pulling out the linear EQ clipper, the clip and clean, to really just, make sure that I have the tightest snare that I have. Go into my resampler, and then drag it back into the sampler itself. How bad does the latency get in Reason with multiple linear phase EQs? Well, the latency doesn't stack. So let's say you have something with 500 buffer latency units or whatever. If I put another one that has 300 or anything less, it won't stack. It'll stay the same. But I really dislike latency when I'm working, because sometimes I like to jam live, or sometimes I like to automate live, and latency just throws me off. I'm almost certain it doesn't stack, but I'll have to check. So continuing on with drums. Here I'm looking for a small snare to kind of create a just a little fill in there to keep things interesting. Also, if you notice on kind of this dungeon style that this track is going to become, I don't have straight hi-hats the whole time. And I find that having a lot of space in between the hats makes a good groove for this kind of stuff, for the mid basses to eventually sit inside. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having, straight quarter note hi-hats on a darker dungeon tune. I've done that too, but in this certain case, after I was listening to, I did like some reference listening, Cryptic Minds and Leon Switch and stuff, and I found that, especially in Cryptic Minds, they don't always have a very solid pattern of hi-hat. It's kind of just a riff, a jam. So this is, I think, the mid ground between like a riffed jammed hi-hat and a completely straight hi-hat. Here I'm putting a spring reverb on this little fill, but I take it off eventually. Because once I have the mid basses in there, I feel like the reverb takes up too much space. Is that spring reverb free? No. That spring reverb unit has a couple of VSTs in it that I built just to have it easy and accessible. I've been building a lot of just combinators and Reason that make just make my workflow a little bit faster. I can load up 5 different Spring plugins and decide which one is best really quick. Is the combinator? Yeah, it's like the macros in Ableton. You basically, or Patcher in FL Studio. You basically put a bunch of units, and then you can send different knobs to do different things, or a single knob to do multiple things. But what I like about them in Reason is that you can put art on them. It just makes it a little more fun. So here I'm adding a snare layer, an incidental. I love making drums. I think drums are my favorite thing to make when it comes to music. I do enjoy, melodies and mid basses and stuff, but I could just sit down and make drum loops for days. And I would say a lot of my work in progress project files are just drum loops. So I take my time, I soak it in. I was watching some YouTube while doing this, chatting on Discord. And you can see through the whole way that I'm making these drums, I have that waveform meter on the right, just to keep things tight. It's easier to keep things tight as you go rather than try and clean them up after, I think. That's just how I work. But so now that I have all the drums set up, I don't need that anymore. And we do a little bit of a copy pasta. Boom, intro. So I've got tons and tons of samples, obviously, that I've acquired over the years. So here I'm just browsing through them.
His version sounds as follows.
And in typical dungeon style, a little bit of duduk. Darude. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes to just try and line up the phrases. It's funny watching yourself produce when you know what the outcome will be. Like, I have the answer to what I'm struggling with right now. If only I could tell young Whittler. I've already used the Passion of the Christ samples. I've used Black Hawk Down. If it has a Duduk, I have it sampled. Duduk. Duduk Nukem. This takes me a little bit of time to kind of suss out, but in the end, it's worth it. Oh, Dandy just brought me a juice. Cheers. Cheers on the juice. Write that down. W Dandy indeed. All right, so I'm almost there. Trying to really time it so that the end of the phrase comes before the drop. But you notice that at the end of that phrase, it goes up. Do, do. I want it to end on the do, not the but the do. Time stretch sounded bad. So, mess around here a little bit, trying to figure out. And in the end, it ends up kind of accidentally, but also I kind of like it. It ends up having this little bit of a pattern. Do 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 do. Just because of the nature of me poorly looping it. A little bit, a little crossfading, but yeah, it ends up working nicely to introduce the drop. All right. Now that I have it all in place, I'm going to clean it up a little bit in terms of EQ and dynamics and such. What part of the stream are we getting the Suica tips? Right now? Yesterday I finished off with a 1628, which isn't too bad. Do you still use that Chrome audio recorder? I ran into issues lately being that the recordings are clipping. Zarquan, you can always use this website that I'll link, YT5s, that you can rip from YouTube. But I think actually the best way to rip from YouTube is directly recording the audio through virtual cables. So what I'm doing here, I created this unit called motion. I'm going to pause the video real quick just to show you guys what the motion does. Let's just load in a drum loop really quick. So what this unit does is it essentially creates motion based on the sample that you feed it. If you have kilohertz phase plant and stuff, I can send you this. I have no problem sharing this. So if I turn it all the way up, it'll be just motion. Here's both. Here's without. So essentially all it really is a single snap heap that really has just a whole bunch of various automations in it, or LFO shapes that'll trigger various things at various times. Oh, it's not even on. So yeah, if you have Snap Heap, hit me up in Discord if you would like a copy of that motion unit. All right, back to the video. So what I did there is I bounced it as a full wet signal, so that it doesn't mess with my drum bus, and I can just have more control over it in audio. Control tails and stuff. And as of right now, I'm actually really organized and trying my hardest really trying my hardest to keep this project organized for this specific video. But you'll see it eventually goes off the rails when I start making the rest of it. All right, we've reached our first serum. And we're looking for a pad to kind of have a nice bolstering layer for the intro solo. Am I talking too much? Should I just let it play or? So here I'm learning that this duduk that I so lovingly put in place is in C. And that's awful because I'm trying to be an F. So here in my brain, I'm trying to decide, do I go 5 semitones up or 7 semitones down to hit F? Which sounds less bad? Yeah, really, they both are not too awful, 7 down or 5 up. But I found that the 5 up felt a little better because the drop was going to go down and be darker and be a lower octave. So I figured it'd be a good contrast rather than just having super low the whole way. Here I'm bouncing it in place because that pitch shifter creates a whole bunch of latency. And I dislike latency. And so I do keep the original just in case I want to change it. I just get rid of the pitch shifter so that I don't have the latency. Here I'm gonna lay down the underpad. Just gonna clean up the MIDI a little bit. So I didn't like that sound. Tried to EQ it out, didn't work. So I just went into the patch to figure out where it was coming from. And I got rid of it. Ascend is a unit that I built. It's essentially like Endless Smile. It filters up while adding a little bit of reverb. Just to give a little bit of movement and to pull away low end before the drop. Do a little bit automation by hand using the mouse. Sometimes I do map it to one of my MIDI controllers, but if I'm leaning back and I can't reach the MIDI controller, it's just by mouse. And again, bouncing in place because not for latency, but because the MIDI notes are so long and the pad is just, very reverby and has a long release, that this way I can control it better and I don't have to start from the beginning of the MIDI notes just to hear and play the sound itself. So I get rid of the MIDI and I move the effects onto the audio. All right, intro is pretty much there. I decide I want to try a little bit of let the intro leak into the drop. Yeah, that's right. Reason won't play the MIDI unless it's at the start, which I think is a good thing, because let's say you start in the middle, does it catch up with any modulation, or is it just picking up as if it started right from the middle? I've never used any other DAW for that. This is a sample that's in the Whittler sample pack. I use it quite often, actually, and it's hardly noticeable. When used subtly, anyway. And again, just trying to stay organized. Hey, Hayes, thank you for the 4 months. I appreciate that. So it does trigger. If you are triggering in the middle of the MIDI, it'll just act like it's the beginning. I can see the appeal of that, but also it might confuse me if I'm triggering in the middle and I think that's the beginning. So I like the way Reason does it. I usually just bounce to audio anyway. All right, being organized just for this video. I'm not usually this organized. I mean, I'm organized when it comes to buses, but not when it comes to like naming everything properly and putting them in order. All right, so that was the end of video 1. I took a break here, and here's video 2. Let's start that up. Making the intro before the drop is brave. I don't really have a specific order that I do things in. Sometimes I'll do the intro first, sometimes I'll do the drop first, sometimes I'll do the drums first, sometimes I'll do the bass first. It's just you just play around in the dawn, whatever happens and gets you inspired, you go with it. All right. So we are starting on the basses now. So I know that I'm focusing on this as a mid bass and that I'm going to have my sub bass separate. But yeah, I'll be quiet now and we'll just watch me do this for a bit. Pausing for a second. I have two major ways that I approach Reese basses and using Reese's in kind of a dungeon style. The one way is directly creating the riff. Like in this instant, I know at the drop, I want it to go like kick what. And sometimes I'll do that. I'll work on the specific riff itself. But other times I won't even have the idea of what's going to happen and I just jam out various types of LFOs and attack times and filters. And then after I do all that and I have a nice mud pie, I'll then resample into the project, kind of cut and paste. So this one is the direct idea version, not so much the resample version, but it does end up being a lot of resampling after. The secret sauce to these dungeon sounds I haven't used yet, but you will see the secret sauce in a second, and it will happen throughout the entire track. Here it comes. Well, I mean, yeah, but that's not the secret sauce yet. Here's that secret sauce right here. Boom. Secret sauce. Big old stanky notch. Just trying out various notch movement. This filter it's called a rack extension, which means it's a unit in reason. So it is third party. It's not stock reason, but it only works in reason. Yeah, I mean, reason has its bad rap. Not a bad rap, but like, reason's always been considered, I think, the little cousin of the major DAWs. But it can do a couple things that are really unique to itself. And then one of the other things that's really unique is all the third party racks that no other DAW really has, except for now you have the Reason VST, that you can have them. That needs some multiband limiting. Okay, let me go into the past and tell myself that. I don't seem to be listening though. All right, grabbing another ducker. Have you tried the super omega compression and limiting spectral distortion on this sound? On the one hand, I can't tell if you're. Oh, you were joking. I can put a limiter in VLC, which is what this is playing off of. Multipass. I do love myself a multipass. I think the kilohertz bundle, faceplant, and multipass and snap heap are worth their weight in gold. Write that down. Worth getting. What does a plugin weigh? It's a very good question. Scientists are still trying to figure that out. How much will this plugin run me on my electric bill? Scientists are still trying to figure that out. So, in reality, while recording this, I'm watching YouTube, I'm watching Netflix, I'm chatting on Discord. So, it may seem seamless, but there is a pause button in OBS, and I have been hitting it a bunch during these recordings. I do be ADHD. How do you focus while doing those things? It's a superpower and also a curse. So now that I have it kind of set up, sometimes I do like to go back to the original waveform and just mess around because, changing something at the beginning of the chain um, can have a whole different outcome on the end of it. So here I'm creating a separate sub bass. Boom, there it is. We're getting there, huh? We're getting there. We have our first hit. Now I'll duplicate that hit to make a variation on it. And sure, you can automate, but I just usually like to duplicate and change, especially if it comes to like LFO shapes or waveforms. Exactly, Shroom. You get the freedom of messing around without having to worry about accidentally ruining your track, your patch that you made. And I've got the two tonals, two different tones. All right, so that was the end of video 2. Took a break here. get on to video 3. Let me resize this real quick. There has to be a way for me to record in a weird aspect ratio on OBS, but I haven't figured it out yet. All right, so here I'm going for another bass. I decide to go with phase plant. Just switch it up. Switch it up. What is my top tip on anything? Have fun and practice a lot, but have fun practicing. Usually take frequent breaks. Yeah. I'll get up. I'll annoy Dandy for a bit. Maybe play some Suika. You hardly ever see me using Europa. I use it for wonky shit, not so much for dark shit. I do love a Europa though. So some of the videos cut off because I'm in widescreen and I didn't record full wide, but I think you got the point there. It was an LFO. So here, Obsidian and Obsidian 2 are units that I built in the past. Let me just I'll open up Reason, give you a quick example of what each of them has to offer. And I'll use a Europa for key grit or PP Raspberry. All right, so Obsidian is a unit that I built that has it starts off with an overdrive distortion, goes into a trash distortion, very dry here. Goes into snap heap to do a little bit of random filter movement. So it's just random low cut stuff. Goes into a randomized notch filter, just kind of random. This gives it a little bit of chorus and a slight, it says frequency shifter, but it's more like a phaser. OTT, a bunch of terminals, which are just limiters stacked. We got a multipass here to make sure that my low end is in mono and that I have a comb filter going. And then just another limiter at the end. The Dr. X is only here for LFO. So without it, this is the signal. And here's with it. And here I have the ability to make it beefier. I can make it wide or narrow. And here I've got reverb. Obsidian 2 is basically the same thing. It's just various patches. Only this time, I gave it a few more options. So here's without the filter. All right, it's a bit loud. And then I can turn on the filters to randomly move. And get some extra movement. Reverb and delay. And turn the sub off if I need. But yeah, it's really like an easy mode. Go from this to this. So you're gonna see a couple of those in this in the production video. And I'm sorry that I just, go easy mode, but that's why I've built these units to help me save time and effort. Here I'm deciding if I want to go narrow to wide or wide to narrow. I go from narrow to wide. And I think when it comes to Reese play, it's an underrated technique to mess with the width. Here we're notching the shit out of it. And the notch that I'm using is kind of it's a double-edged sword because it's a completely hard notch. Anything that's inside the dark blue there. Sorry, let me pause it. Anything that's inside the dark blue here is completely cut out. It's brick walled, which is great for like really dark tones, but at the same time, you're totally losing your main tonality. So sometimes it's easier or better to just use an EQ and cut your own notch that you can decide how much to cut rather than just brick wall cutting it. Because again, you kind of lose some of that main tonality. You can saturate after to get some of it back too. That's a good tip. I'll be right back. I'm going to let this play, but I'll be right back. All right, sorry, I'm just catching up with chat real quick. Somebody asked about where I usually high cut or prefer to mono. It depends on the sound, but usually around 80 to 90 hertz and above. And then someone else asked, can you explain why you stacked so many limiters? So in this case, let me open up Reason again. In this case, the limiters that I'm using have a very specific tonality to them. The terminal. So let me show you what it sounds like when you stack these specific limiters. All right, here's with none. 1, 2, 3. Let's lower the volume a bit. 4 and 5. You can see it almost gives this dispersion type of effect. So that's why I'm specifically stacking terminals. It's not just a volume thing, it's a tonality type of thing. So now what I'm doing here, at least I think, I'm creating just a volume envelope in which I can more control the rhythm of how it plays. Here you see I'm trying to recover some of what the notch has destroyed. And then a reverb after the gain. I guess I didn't like the gain thing that I did there. Just got rid of it. Yeah, boosted. Do you end up soothing your mid bus for heavy filtered basses like this? Usually that's the last thing that I do. And I'll usually do it more for the low mids than the highs. So after this specific chapter is over, in about 18 minutes, I'll go back and I'll open up the project file again just to play it for you guys so you can re-get context of what's going to happen in the end. And for those of you who haven't heard the full beat yet. So 18 minutes and I'll play the beat. Yeah, you don't usually have to soothe mid basses if you're building them and you can have control over them. But when it comes to these Reese basses, a lot of the times they're not stable by their nature of the filters moving. Just all the movement of the filters, can cause some weird volume spikes. So that's why on Reese basses I usually soothe the bus like way at the end. So here, okay, each of these hits has a random filter effect on it, right? Because it's going through Obsidian, and Obsidian has randomized filters. So what I'm doing here is I'm just exporting 4 different hits into audio. So that way it'll never change. It'll always be the same hit, and I can just pick one of the hits if I want to. And if I don't like any of them, I'll just repeat the process and rebounce a bunch of hits. But that's the only downside to working with the Obsidian patches that I've created is that it's all randomized. But this is how I work around it. Guess I decided that one's good. Not to interrupt, but I just got a watermelon in Suica. Listen, that's worthy of interrupting. The feeling when a watermelon hits, oh, the dopamine rush of a watermelon in Suica, hard to beat. Your first watermelon, congratulations. You never forget your first time. So here I want to do a glide. Typical Reese glide octave. Oh my god, it's the Mr. Bill guy. That's me, Mr. Bill guy. So in Reese is like this, octaves and then also octave plus one, 13 semitones is a very, very cool place to be to create movement. And there I just throw obsidian on it again because it's what I made it for. I made it so that I could save time. Yeah, there's no wrong way to make a Reese, really. Just filters, various types of filters, notches, comb filters, maybe a couple of flangers, distortion, repeat. Just repeat over and over. I'll rewind a sec. I'm not sure if you saw that, but here, um, I've got two notches working against each other. Actually, that's just a low. It's just a low pass. Never mind. But yeah, just as much movement as possible. Here, I'm lost. Where am I? There I am. And so instead of going to the 13, I'm going to an octave. And then here I'm gonna use the pitch bend to climb up to the 13. And because it's randomized in an obsidian, I bounce it to audio for the purpose of having it be consistent. Funkmont says one thing with respaces, don't overthink them. That's when it sounds kind of amateurish. Another thing about respaces, I think, don't be afraid to start over and also experiment with changing the beginning of your chain. Like it's easy to just add stuff on top, but try putting something in the middle all of a sudden. Try switching up and getting a different filter, like right there in the middle. Change your original waveform. Doesn't always have to be directly in order of how you pick the effects. You can always move things around to get different tonality. Here I'm still sussing out where I want each of these parts to be. I think I'm kind of overthinking where they should be right now instead of instead of just focusing on making more sounds and then putting them where they need to be. And there's no real sub yet happening on most of these hits. Don't want to be a question hog. No, please be a question hog. That's what this is for. I'd love to hear your piece on placing drums versus the rest of the mix. I feel like I struggle sometimes to sit them within the mix, not too loud, but still with good transients and good crack. Like the way your drums are sounding not too loud but prominent. Yeah, we can talk about drums after this if you remind me. I can go over some drum tips after the whole video is over. Do you always put a sub layer on your respaces and cut the lows? I would say 95% of the time, yes. The only time I don't is if it's specifically supposed to be kind of raw and rough. Um, but I would say, yeah, 95% of the time, I do create a dedicated sub bass. Yeah, by nature it's unstable because of the filters, the flangers, distortions. Subscribe to Funkmon's Patreon. Do you ever have trouble creating sub bass to match the more complicated wubs? Maybe once in a while, but here's the thing. A lot of times people try and directly match their sub bass to what the mid bass is doing. And that's not always necessarily the best thing to do. Sometimes the sub bass can be doing its own thing, regardless of what the mid basses are doing. But yeah, there is sometimes a little bit of a struggle if you do want to match them up. That it takes a couple of minutes. But just keep in mind the only things that happen with sub bass that you can control are pitch and volume. So keeping that in mind, it should be pretty simple to just think, what is the pitch of the mid bass? What is the volume of the mid bass when it comes in and out? And just work with it from there. Sometimes dumb sub bass is best. This track is 100% dumb sub bass. You'll see it's basically singular notes. Um, they're not always underneath one of the basses, and I think that's also really important for this kind of dungeon sound is that not every Reese needs a sub bass. Sometimes it's good to just let the Reese be by itself. Yeah, Shroom has a good point. You can always bust your mid bass and separate sub bass together and give it a little bit of saturation to help glue them together. So here I'm just trying to find some timing, shorten that up a bit. Instead of having a long note, just have it be a wah single here. And in order to give it a little more bite, I do some volume automation here as kind of an envelope for the sound. This gives a little bit more bite. Dungeon be like, yeah, I got the first 8 bars of the drop done, only took me 5 hours. In the way that I'm doing it, yeah. But you can always do let me pause this. You can always go the other direction where instead of creating specific mid basses for specific moments in the song, you just have a day or a session where you just completely create Reese mid basses, fast ones, slow ones, ones that pitch. And then once you have a nice collection of mid basses, you basically just play a puzzle game where, put the pieces where you think they fit. So this is kind of like I don't want to say a brute force, but it's probably not the most ideal way to do this type of sound. Not that there's a right or ideal way. I just think that I'm working harder than I need to create this sound in the mood. Excuse me. Waveform Tetris, exactly. Struggle to find the best way to make a recent serum. Well, the thing about making a recent serum is you can't really fully make a recent serum. You need way more post processing. You need various stacked filters. You need various extra distortions. And yeah, serum just doesn't have the amount of tools that you need, which is why phase plant is amazing because you can just stack as many units as you want. We have about 2 minutes left in this chapter here. After this chapter is done, I'll open up the project so we can take a listen to what it ends up being in the end, and then we'll continue. What is your thought process when you're in the phase of post processing? Is there a specific order? Not really. I mean, usually I'll go distortion, filter of some sort, usually a notch filter, maybe another filter afterwards, some a little bit more distortion, comb filtering. There's no direct way to do it. Just it's a repeat process of distort, filter, effect, distort, filter, effect. I'm gonna run uh, and do something real quick. Or actually, I'll do it after I load the project and show it to you. Comb filters, definitely cheat codes when it comes to Reese bases. They really do help. And usually I like to comb the top end, from like 10K to 20K. All right, so that was the end of that chapter. Let me open up the project file. You could take a listen to what this becomes. Also, hi. How's it going? How you doing? Thank you for being here. I'll hopefully be doing more of these different styles, different uh, ways of approaching the music and producing it, and then posting them to YouTube. Is this a good time to ask on drums? Just wait till the end, till we're totally done with everything, and I can just do a quick overview of drums. Were you here at the beginning of the stream? Because I start this whole stream off with the drums, and you can basically see that the main thing that I'm doing is trying to contain their dynamics. All right, this is a big project file. Let's give it a second here. No need to be sorry. All right, so this is where we end up. All right, so that's the project. It's still, it's not fully there. There's blank spaces. Sometimes the rhythms feel a little bit off. But the main part of the track is there. So here's the next chapter. We are on chapter 4. There's about, let's see, 10. There's about half an hour left total in all these chapters. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So here I decided I'm going to try massive because I wanted to get some new type of re-space sounds. And if you're always using the same synths, you can kind of get caught up in the same sounds. So here I'm trying to remember how to use massive. And you can also notice that this is a completely blank project file here. Sometimes I like to do that. I like to close off the main project file because it's just so messy. I'll go into a second project file and just work on something and then copy and paste it into the original project file. It's good on my CPU and it's just, my brain just feels better with a fresh, clean Reason project. Sure to enable restart via gate. I didn't actually know that. Also, sorry for the quality not being super great. Again, I haven't figured out yet how to properly record my aspect ratio with OBS, but I will for future videos. Yeah, a lot of it funk mod has to do with the scream filter and the modulation oscillator. So this thing up here, the scream filter, has great resonance. And then down here on the left, the modulation oscillator is really, I mean, it's basically just FM, but has a very unique characteristics. Also, check it out, Two Mice. Two Mice, One Doll. Come back. Come back. Back. Bite me. Bite me. Could you imagine plugging in two mice into a computer and having two separate mice and just you and your friend are like trying to produce with two mice? What would that be like? Chaos. But it's the future. I'm telling you, it's the future. All right. Since Massive doesn't really have a comb filter, maybe it does. I don't know. I'm deciding to throw in a comb filter via Snap Heap. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen, the notch filter. Probably like 20 notches on this at this point. Notch always given some great movement. Here I decide to automate the resonance. I don't know if I keep it or not. All right, so it's almost the end of this chapter. The only thing that I do is I copy and paste this from this new project into the main project file. I also saved this just in case I needed to go back to the patch itself and figure something out. Fast forward here. Computer be chugging along here. There's the new patch I made. Brought it into the file. Throw it into my bus. And be confused as to why there's no sound because I accidentally muted VLC. This is reason 12.